Chapter 1. Betrayed by the System. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Sir, an actress turned show host spoke with sparkling eyes. You have inspired millions of entrepreneurs around the world. Starting without a penny to your name, today, you have become the richest man in the world and is also the world's largest electronics and weapons manufacturer. How does it feel to reach the pinnacle of success at the young age of 35? Good question. Seated opposite to her was a young man, seemingly in his early 20s based on his appearance alone. Possessing an aloof gaze with a humble demeanor, he was a man with weight to every word he uttered. To others, my life might seem like a success story. But I am just another human with human needs, wants, and fears. Due to my busy schedule, I cannot even have 3 meals per day. Upon seeing his mildly pained expression, the host lady became sad. To think even the richest man in the world feels the same as us. Can't say I'm not overwhelmed by this notion. Despite my monetary wealth, I am not but a human. The man smiled. I am not but a human, the host lady muttered with an enlightened gaze before announcing with a loud voice to the audience, that's all, everyone. Give a round of applause to our chief guest, Compass Carburetor. The seated audience gave raucous cheers as the sounds of clapping filled the studio. The interview was being broadcast through all major television channels, reaching the eyes and ears of more than 1 billion people. The chief guest, Compass Carburetor, gave a polite nod to the host lady, got up from his seat and exited the place, accompanied by a couple of his bodyguards. Seeing his swiftly leaving figure, the host lady sighed in disappointment. I wanted to get his number. Leaving the studio, Compass Carburetor boarded his bullet and bomb-proof car and headed towards the airport, entering a route maintained exclusively for him. He then boarded his private jet, watching it take off from the window. Sir, would you like to drink? The air hostess pushed forth a tray, outlining a limited edition collection of the most expensive wine in the world. Sure, Compass Carburetor nodded, watching with a smile as the air hostess poured him a glass and left, knowing very well that he only drank a glass per day. Once the air hostess left, there was only him in the cabin. Peering through the window, he saw a sea of clouds. Raising his glass as he spoke, a great day must be accompanied by wine. He then brought it close to his nose, sniffing it once to take in the aroma, pristine, elegant, the wonder of human civilization. Ding. Host status. Intoxicated, ding. Removing alcohol intoxication, he then brought the wine glass closer to his mouth, intending to take a sip when he inhaled by mistake, taking in the aroma of the wine, pristine, elegant, ding. Host status. Intoxicated, ding. Removing alcohol intoxication, he then pinched his nose, smirking as he brought the glass closer, taking a sip, pristine. Ding. Host status. Intoxicated, ding. Removing alcohol intoxication, I give up. He grunted, placing the wine glass on a nearby table, sighing, why has my alcohol tolerance never improved? Ding. Replying to host. It's your body's disposition. You can improve your alcohol tolerance by taking some of your body management points from the beauty section and placing them in alcohol tolerance section, ding. You don't have any free body management points, it's fine, Compass Carburetor sighed, a healthy, strong, and handsome body is infinite times better than a body with alcohol tolerance. Ding. As you say, host, pull up the system interface. Upon his command, a screen flashed before him, displaying everything he had obtained to date. Ding. Money making system. Level 6, host. Compass Carburetor, race. Human, physique. Health, level 10, strength, level 10, dexterity, level 8, stamina, level 7, intelligence, level 7, cognition, level 9, natural recovery, level 6, 5 senses, level 10, resting, level 10, skills. Logic, level 10, bargain, level 10, money sense, level 10, profit acquisition, level 10, leadership, level 8, higher bargain, level 4, merchant, level 8, upon seeing the extent of his growth, Compass Carburetor was giddy, I'm getting more powerful and richer with every passing day. Recalling his appearance from when he was a student to his current peerless handsome self, there was barely any resemblance. And, their character and disposition were heaven and earth. From a rash, good. 4. Nothing student with 0 excelling fields to the owner of the largest conglomerate on earth, I've come a long way. Everything's thanks to you, money-making system. He smiled, watching the passage of the clouds from the window, noticing a grand landmass be revealed under. System, begin upgradation. He commanded. Ding. Replying to host. System upgradation from level 6 to level 7 will take 7 hours. Do you wish to comply? Yes, begin upgradation. Compass Carburetor nodded, hearing a beep sound as something within him seemed to have been switched off. When he first obtained the money-making system, every ding was irritating. But now, they were his ASMR. The reason he was intimated by the system was that when it was upgrading, all his skills would become inactive. This meant he wouldn't possess any of the abilities he normally wielded through the system. This would prove to be dangerous if he engaged in any deals or talked with a client during this time. Without his skills, he was almost useless against the cunning people he dealt with on a daily basis. So, only when he had enough time to rest was upgrading the system feasible. And, since he dealt with clients from around the world, he never had a fixed schedule of sleep. That was why he had upgraded his resting to level 10, the maximum limit in the current level 6 money-making system. This way, he was able to remain fresh with the minimum most sleep. At level 10, he only needed 3 hours of sleep per day to remain perfectly fresh for the rest of the day. Once the system upgrades to level 7, I'll unlock food-related abilities to upgrade my physique further. He muttered, watching the jet exit the layer of clouds as a vast stretch of land was outlined beneath. It was a private island that was situated in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a landmass that spanned a radius of 30 kilometers. And, this was his private property, the place where his factory, office, etc. was located. As everything was in one place, and since it was situated in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, he never had any problems with security. And, since the island was self-sufficient, all his employees lived on the island, forming a bustling metropolitan city. As it was an artificial island, it was equipped with state-of-the-art technologies, keeping the place free from pollution. Carburetor Island. Named after his family name, it was his home. Once the private jet landed at the airport, his team escorted him to his home. Until now, he was all smiles and giggles. But once he entered his home, he noticed the lifeless atmosphere within, immediately turning sullen as he asked his assistant, "Where's Stencil?" "Sir, she's still in school. It'll take her 4 more hours to return home," his assistant replied. "All right," he sighed, heading to the sofa as he sat on it, looking at the picture frame nearby. In it was a family photo, consisting of his parents, his wife, and his daughter, Stencil. Unfortunately for him, 5 years ago, when his company was in a dangerous conflict with another company that operated in the same business field, they had clashed. And, his foes targeted his family that had been on a holiday trip. His daughter had been the sole survivor. But, she had lost her right arm in the process. Even though he had invested tremendously in the bionic arm technology to fit her with a hand that was almost the same as her original, the scars of that incident never healed. Even though he had caused his rival company to go bankrupt and jailed everyone responsible for the death of his family, he was left with a hollow heart. After all, despite his revenge being successful, his family couldn't return. He had hoped upgrading his system would one day allow him to revive his wife and parents. That was his only hope. Now, Stencil was his only family, his only driving force. It made him realize that money and power were only the means to an end, not the principal wants of being a human. Feelings, the familial bond was what made a greedy beast, a human. I better complete my work so that I can spend some time with Stencil when she returns. Compass Carburetor accompanied his assistant and headed towards one of his R&D facilities. This was where research was being conducted on a ground-breaking weapon technology. The skyscraper was fully dedicated to the creation of this weapon. More than half the floors were just equipped with a supercomputer and the components necessary to keep it functional. Arriving at the basement, Compass Carburetor looked at a shooting range where a team of scientists were huddled around, calibrating something in a giant screen. Upon seeing his arrival, the head scientist smiled. "We were just about done, the world's first evergreen gun." "Show me." Compass Carburetor approached a table where a bunch of machines were scanning a delicate looking gun. Appearance-wise, it was plain looking. The barrel and the grip formed a perfect L. There was a trigger attached to it. Overall, it didn't have a cool or breath-taking appearance. It had an ivory appearance, sleek to the design. Upon touching it, Compass Carburetor was satisfied. "Does it have all the specs I specified?" "Yes," the head scientist explained, "the entire model is made purely from carbon and carbon-based products. It is solar-powered and takes around a day for a full charge. After being charged, it has enough power to shoot 24 bullets. The bullets are launched using the railgun principle." He then boasted with a smile, "The nozzle can suck in the air and filter in only the carbon and carbon-based products. And it processes them internally to create bullets. Everything is automatic. It takes an hour to create a bullet. They are rectangular in shape with a sharp edge, and a minute after it is launched, the bullet sublimates into air, leaving behind no traces. The magazine holds 6 bullets. The barrel only spanned a length of 20 centimeters. Overall, it was a small gun." The head scientist laughed as he spoke. "The gun weighs 250 grams, and when we did impact testing, it hardly suffered a scratch after we dropped a ton of steel on it from a meter high. The bullets are launched at speeds only below the speed of sound. And the perfect accuracy range is 50 meters. Beyond that, the accuracy drops by a centimeter for every meter in length. Moreover, its internal air circulation system absorbs all the knockback from shooting. Once the magazine is emptied, it expunges the air that had absorbed all the shock. Overall, this is the perfect, self-replenishing gun, never requiring any maintenance or supply. Even a child can shoot it without feeling any wrist/arm pain. In the future, this would change the tide of war." The head scientist spoke, looking at Compass Carburetor. "Please do the honors of naming it." "Anthozoa." Compass Carburetor said after staring at it for a while, "I feel the name is apt for a weapon of such caliber." He then grabbed the gun, walked towards the shooting range, and made a couple of shots, nodding in praise. "Incredible, peerless, wonder of modern science." He then brought the gun with him back to his house. Even though the head scientist wished to stop him, he didn't have the guts to do so, watching Compass Carburetor play around with the gun as he returned home. He placed it in the holster attached to his hip, checking out his appearance in the mirror as he laughed. Upon hearing the bell ring, he checked the time, beaming with a smile since his daughter had arrived. He waved his hand to the assistant, telling her to remain in her position as he hopped around in joy, opening his door to greet his daughter. "Oh my precious." Though, just when he was about to hug her, the world turned black and white as time seemed to have stopped. And unlike the usual tone, something seemed different as he heard the notification from his system. Ding! Money-making system has successfully upgraded to level 7, returning to the system world now. Chapter 2. Why? Ha! You are listening at novelfull.audio. What the hell is happening? Compass Carburetor thought in a fluster as he noticed his body had become static, unmoving. The world itself seemed to have come to a standstill. The notification he heard further unnerved him, causing a feeling of suspicion and dread to fill his heart. And just as he had feared, a portal manifested before him. It seemed to be a product of another dimension as it didn't interact with anything else from his world, focusing only on him as his body was sucked into it. The moment he went into it, the portal vanished as time in the place resumed. Stencil looked before her in confusion as her eyes widened, slowly morphing into horror. Her father had mysteriously vanished right before her eyes. Kayak. The stimulus was too much for her to handle as she fainted. Lady Stencil. The assistant shouted as she came to her rescue. All along, her body was drenched with sweat, having also witnessed the disappearance of Compass Carburetor. What's happening? What in the hell is happening? She screamed mentally, unable to make heads or tails of the supernatural phenomenon that transpired before her. She hurriedly called an ambulance first to take care of Stencil, hoping to worry about the rest later. The moment he was pulled into the portal, Compass Carburetor was able to flail his hands and shout for help. He was in a mysterious tunnel-shaped bubble of sorts. For some reason, an intense sense of dread emanated from the depths of his being. It seemed long but had ended after a second as Compass Carburetor crashed into soft mud. He hurriedly got up, noticing that he was in a thicket of trees. The place was rich with life. He looked around, unable to see anything past the thicket of trees. He seemed to have fallen into an open patch of land in the midst of a dense forest. And before he could comprehend his situation, intense pain overwhelmed him as something seemed to be intent to exit his body. Aergrug. He flailed in pain, grabbing the mud as he clenched his fist and slammed into the ground repeatedly. Kakik. Compass Carburetor, oh Compass Carburetor. An ethereal voice resounded. Who's that? Amidst his pain, he shouted, looking around to see that there wasn't anyone near him. That, you're asking who I am? LOL, the voice responded, followed by cackling sounds of derisive laughter. Sweat covered his back as he craned all the strength in him, turning around to see an ethereal face behind him. It was his appearance from before he obtained the system. The portion below the neck seemed to be serpentine that thinned until turning needle-width, attached to his back. It seemed to be exiting his back little by little as the ethereal face of his past self hovered in the air, cackling, I've been with you through your rise. Rather, I am the reason you rose to the peak of the world despite being a worthless insect. The ethereal face morphed to resemble a coin that was covered by blood. A line formed in its middle before parting way to reveal a large mouth that was bigger than Compass Carburetor's head, filled with jagged teeth. Forming a snout, it began to sniff while cackling, beginning to condense a humanoid body that consisted of a head that was almost twice the size of the body. As it continued to extract itself from Compass Carburetor, he screamed in pain all along. Finally, there only seemed to be a small part of it left within him, as the monstrous creature spanning 4 meters in height cackled. Its hunched back, its humongous coin head, and its exaggerated mouth gave it a sinistrous appearance. Slumping a ragged cloth sack on its back, it looked at Compass Carburetor. Now, do you have any final words? Money-making system. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Why? Sporting an exhausted expression, having screamed in pain all along, Compass Carburetor weakly muttered, gazing at the monster before him with a hazy gaze. For some reason, he was only able to twitch in place, unable to move. Why? You're asking me why? The monster roared in laughter like it had heard the funniest of all things. You should have asked that at the start when I appeared in your body. Why did I appear in your body, when you had 0 redeeming qualities? Why did I pick you and give you an opportunity to change your life? Why, out of the 7+ billion people, did I choose you? Did you ever ask about it back then? Having read numerous stories about the lives of people taking a turn for the best after obtaining a system, you happily accepted me, right? It cackled, remember your first reaction when I notified you of my existence. You roared with laughter. You didn't even possess a hint of suspicion of my existence. Rather, you took it as if a system appearing in a person was natural, something that should have only existed within stories and not in reality. After seeing the benefits I presented, you happily used my services. For the past 20 years I was in your body, not once have you ever asked me why. And now, you ask that. It laughed, amused upon seeing his expression. Since you're about to die, I'll answer your question. The stories of every system host usually end as a happily ever after sequence once they reach the peak of that world. But, its exaggerated mouth curled up, oozing out blood like drool, but at that point, they vanish, making their tales a legend that is forgotten over the passage of time as mere fiction. In actuality, we return to our world, the system world, and devour our hosts, gaining everything they have. This is how we grow as systems. Once we devour them, we digest our gains and head to another world, selecting a host that lacks any semblance of talent and parasitise them. The blood it drooled touched the ground, corroding it, and, that's the answer to your question, why? You, monster. Compass Carburetor gritted his teeth, gazing at it with bloodshot eyes. Well, there's nothing you can do to resist me. It wasn't long, but I had fun watching you dance to my tunes. It opened its mouth wide, revealing numerous rows of teeth within, inching closer to Compass Carburetor, intending to devour him. I won't miss you, bye. Chapter 3. Partial Truth. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. As the monster inched closer, about to bite Compass Carburetor, it uttered, taking joy out of the situation, "Don't worry, I'm not done with Earth yet. As you have mysteriously disappeared, your company would turn chaotic. All the board of directors would fight to reap benefits for themselves. As for your daughter, Stencil, she would be tossed aside. What can an 8-year-old child do in such a situation? Haha." Its teeth touched the back of Compass Carburetor, piercing mildly through the skin, looking at the thin stream exiting his back. It hadn't fully left his body yet, so it was waiting until the process was done before it devoured him. In the meantime, it wished to rile him up to the maximum, taking advantage of his helpless state. And when Stencil is tossed aside on the street, I would enter her. I would fuel her revenge and make her vow to destroy your company to get back on the people that had cast her aside from her home. And, when she eventually succeeds, I'll repeat the same formula, ha ha ha. It snickered, and, you won't be alive to see that. But, if the reincarnation system grabs hold of your soul, you might get a chance to be born on Earth once again and see how much your daughter suffers. I'll kill you. Compass Carburetor gritted his teeth as his orifices bled from his exertion. He tried to move his hand but failed to do so as the flow of the money-making system's body exiting him left him brutally weak and immobile. Kill me. Upon hearing his shout, it laughed as its tongue shot out and slapped his face non-stop. You can't. You can't. You can't. It's impossible for you. Any living being can never hope to go against a system. We are called plot armors for a reason. Gah. Compass Carburetor tried his best to resist, but the stench emanating from the monster's mouth further weakened him, making him wish to puke his guts out. He could feel the pain as the teeth of the monster was slowly sinking into his back. Any second, once its body fully escapes him, it would devour him. Quick. Reach it. He mentally bellowed, inching his hand towards his holster. Even though he was barely able to inch his hand forth, it meant the monster had almost finished exiting his body. Any moment, and he might be shredded apart and devoured. Right at this time, there was a flash of motion blur before the flow exiting his body was severed. A second later, the monster began to scream in pain as it flailed on the ground, quickly jumping backwards as it increased the distance. The moment the connection was severed, the remainder of its body that was heading out retreated into his body. Compass Carburetor was able to move now. Reaching his hand to his gun, he pulled it out and aimed at the monster, making a shot. The bullet landed on the side of the monster's coin face, spilling out blood in the process, causing it to scream in shock. How is this possible? A mortal cannot injure a system. Without speaking any nonsense, Compass Carburetor aimed at the center of its face, shooting again. But this time, it had reacted the moment his hand moved, dodging the attack as it hid behind a tree. Just when it tried to retaliate, it shuddered, sensing danger, hurriedly dodging backwards as the tree it was hiding behind experienced a motion blur before crumbling into pieces. Is some system targeting me now? Damn it. It gazed at Compass Carburetor once, shouting, "You managed to live, but I'll host your daughter now." Saying so, it expended most of its accumulated energy, vanishing from the system world, returning to Earth. It scoured through the Earth, quickly finding Stencil as it seeped into her body without alerting her. It then rested within, focusing on healing its injuries first as it inspected if its capabilities were still functional and if it had lost any. Thankfully, all my core abilities are still with me. Only the portion related to the physique has been left behind. Whatever, they are just useless supplementary abilities, anyway. So thankfully, I didn't suffer much of a loss. It then turned silent, looking at the world from within the body of Stencil. Back in the system world, Compass Carburetor roared in anger upon seeing the figure of the money-making system vanish. He shot the place it had been standing upon, screaming in anger upon seeing that nothing happened. "Don't you dare touch my daughter. Relax, don't lose your cool." A voice resounded from behind him as Compass Carburetor turned around in alarm, pointing his gun in the direction of the sound. There wasn't anyone in the place. He then noticed a shadow in the thicket of trees that was slowly approaching him. Soon after, a figure exited the thicket of trees, looking at Compass Carburetor as it spoke, "If you shout too much, you might garner the attention of a higher grade system. If that happens, the both of us will die." It was a humanoid individual. And, judging based on its appearance, Compass Carburetor attributed it to be a demon. Sure, that works. We are called that in many worlds. The demon nodded. Compass Carburetor then noticed the sword it was holding, recalling the slash that had severed his connection with the money-making system, allowing him to move and save himself. "Thank you for saving me. So, you are smart enough to understand that. That saves me a lot of time and effort." The demon nodded, introducing itself, "Call me Forth. I am the same as you, a system survivor." System survivor. Compass Carburetor wiped the blood on his face and stood up, dusting himself a little as he inquired. Even though he asked a question, his mind was fully on trying to find a way to return to Earth and save his daughter. The demon named Forth realized after seeing his facial expression, sheathing its sword as it spoke, "Don't worry, there is a lot of time before your daughter might come under harm. I'll guide you through a possible solution to save her life. But first, let me explain the state of things to you further." That system had only spoken partial truth. Chapter 4. Why a system always puts the host in dangerous/embarrassing situations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The demon named Forth looked at Compass Carburetor. "There is a reason a system enters the body of a living being and helps them unconditionally." "And why is that?" Compass Carburetor inquired, standing a fair distance away from Forth, unable to trust him wholly. Forth didn't mind the distance, rather looked at him with a nod of acknowledgement. Every world follows its own laws and rules. And the sentient races living in them have distinct differences. But, all of them have one thing in common. And, that is their ability to think, communicate, and feel. Think, communicate, and feel. Compass Carburetor felt like he was able to glean something from it, but the idea was blurry. He then looked at Forth, wishing for it to complete its explanation first. The power of the mind, or mental energy to be exact, is what is common among every sentient race. It's both common and mysterious. If you can think, your brain's ability to consciously think is what mental energy is. And, this is exactly what a system needs to develop. Upon seeing his confusion, Forth smirked. It then said with a smile, "Just think of your life. Weren't you forced to do a lot of missions that placed you either in awkward situations or in the eyes of the public?" Compass Carburetor's eyes widened as a plethora of memories flashed through his mind. "Yes, I've faced such a situation so many times that I got used to it in the end." "Have you ever heard about the term, sheeple?" The demon said. "Sheeple? Do you mean sheep-minded people?" "That term. Compass carburetor recalled a popular internet slang used during his youth. Yes, the same. Fourth nodded, it is common in every world. When there is a trigger or a cause, people rally forth along with it whether they are knowledgeable or ignorant about it. Most of the time, they cause a wave for something that never necessitated something of such a scale in the first place. Its voice then turns solemn, and, this is the power of the mind, a sea of collective thoughts. And, the systems thrive by eating it up. So, when they host someone, they would give rewards and in exchange, put the host through numerous situations where they are the target of people's thoughts. This way, they grow. But, Compass carburetor frowned, the rewards they give are lucrative. Even if this mental energy or whatever is that strong, the things the system produces is always beyond the world's logic. Oh, that's simple, Fourth laughed, what seems to be impossible in your world might be commonplace in another world. And, all systems share access to a marketplace where they trade all sorts of abilities. So, suppose you are given an ability to fly as a gift. And suppose the notion of a human flying is considered absurd in your world, the value of such an ability to you would be priceless, right? Fourth said, watching Compass carburetor nod in response. It then stated, but, for flight system, elevation system, flying system, etc. these are just their basic abilities. So, your system would exchange for their ability temporarily by paying a suitable price and would then bestow it upon you. Its value would be exorbitantly bloated in your perspective, but to your system, it must have been dirt cheap. Through this market, all systems give their hosts seemingly out of their world abilities. And this way, their hosts become the target of envy, jealousy, admiration, hatred, etc. of a large group of people. And a massive volume of mental energy flows to you as a result that your system gobbles it up happily. Fourth shook its head, sighing, if you talk about it in terms of money, suppose the actual value of an ability is 1 unit to the system. But from your perspective, it would be worth at least 1,000 units. As the system picks the abilities it rewards you with, it would always give such abilities where the profit margin is tremendous. So, that's it. Compass carburetor nodded, realization finally hit him. As the richest man on earth, millions of people talked about him on a variety of topics. So, it made a lot of sense. But, he suddenly thought of something, saying, then, why did my system stop doing that and return here? This is the home of the systems, called the system world. It's where they return at the end of their journey. Fourth said while waving its hands. It then pointed at him, you said it yourself, remember. In the end, you got used to it. What does that mean? He was confused. Mental energy isn't an absolute quantizable substance like other forms of energy. It works from a relative perspective. How much you are overwhelmed by something. How much does something mean to you? How much do you long for something? Depending on these, the mental energy obtained by your system varies. Fourth said. It then gazed at the thicket of the trees, frowning once, that's why your system always places you in the most precarious or embarrassing situations. This way, you would be mentally affected by them the most. And that's also why it would give you abilities that would fuel your ambitions and instigate you to eventually reach the peak of the world. This way, the scale of people being influenced by your activity increases. And by this, the amount of thoughts being generated towards you from others form an ocean that gushes towards you. And, when you reach the peak of your world is the time the system reaps the fruits of its harvest, obtaining enough mental energy that it would be able to upgrade itself many times in a short duration. But, Fourth shook its head, once you get used to it, it means you are no longer affected by the thoughts, opinions, and feelings of the masses. That means, the mental energy trickling into you experiences a drastic reduction. Once you reach such a phase, you no longer have any worth to the system. So, Fourth looked at Compass carburetor, it finishes its journey and returns to the system world, devouring you, and then looks for a new target. Chapter 5. Trash to Treasure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why do they have to devour their hosts once they reach the system world? Compass Carburetor asked in confusion. Well, Fourth thought for a moment, to ensure the host generates the greatest of mental energy for them, a system picks a weak, useless bum that is involved in some conspiracy, drama, plotted against, etc. This way, they would rely on the system, and every action they take would cause a lot of people to talk about the host. Suppose someone you thought of as trash for years suddenly showed talent in a lot of fields one fine day. You would be suspicious of that individual, you would definitely try to dig up on him, her, or even harm them out of envy when they steal your rightful opportunities, right? Fourth gave a knowing smile, making eye contact with Compass Carburetor. I'm sure you must have read hundreds of novels with this setting. That's how the systems first train the people of the world to be accepting of a system when it appears in their body. You must have never doubted it even once, right? Fourth laughed. Yes, Compass Carburetor gritted his teeth in anger, sighing in defeat, until the end, I took its existence to be natural. That's how they have changed your perspective through decades of media influence. Fourth nodded, the first generation of systems that land in any world are related to that. They shape the world's literature slowly, at times create one if it didn't exist beforehand, and eventually feed this information to the readers. Over time, those whose lives have been stagnant, uninteresting, tragical, etc. would wish to one day chance upon a system that would change their lives. Fourth said, and that's how they create an operating platform in that world. After that, many other systems would appear in the world one after another. And, each system would have its own focus of growth. A harem system would cause you to be involved with as many of the opposite gender, a sports system would develop your athletic abilities, a supernatural system would materialize your world's myth and cause you to face them, etc. Fourth side, for everything, the host needs to be as empty, gullible, idiotic, and hot-blooded as can be. This way, the amount of mental energy received by the system is the highest. That's why the stories too are geared this way. A system always appears in a trash and changes his fate, turning him into the world's main character. Fourth made eye contact, you and I haven't been any different either. And, it sighed, in the end, you have received a lot of help from the system. So, a part of the system had fused into your body. So, when the system materializes into its true form in the system world, it devours its host to recover all its abilities. If it didn't, and another system devours you, it would obtain some of your system's abilities instead. That's why, when I chanced upon you, I waited until the opportune time before slashing your connection, ensuring a part of your system's body remained within you. Fourth said, and, as the leftover part doesn't have any of its core abilities, your system wouldn't care enough about killing you, given the threat it felt. Otherwise, if it tried everything in its power to kill you, we wouldn't have been able to resist it. That makes sense, Compass Carburetor sighed, massaging his head, and now, the reason I haven't reverted to my trash self is because a part of my system is still within me. Yes, Fourth nodded, to be accurate, only the part of your system that was involved in improving your mind and physique is in you. I know how trashy our original selves are. So, I didn't want a trashy ally. But, would something harmful happen because of it? When Compass Carburetor said, he was interrupted by Fourth, who seemed to be looking around in alarm. Upon noticing its actions, he turned silent, looking around as his hands that were holding his gun trembled a little. He noticed a faint stream of air enter the gun as it seemed to be condensing a bullet. After observing for a while, and upon judging that it was safe, Fourth spoke, there is a portion of your system in your body. If left alone, it would birth another system soon enough. And, you would repeat the same cycle once again and become a victim. But, there's a way to escape from that while still maintaining your current gains. Please teach me, Compass Carburetor bowed. Everything Fourth had said till now made perfect sense, allowing him to understand the reason his money-making system behaved as it had done. He still wasn't fully trusting of the other party, but as he had no choice, he decided to listen and learn first. Actions taken while exercising ignorance were the harbinger of disaster. Knowing it full well, he didn't rashly act, intending to receive knowledge first. At least, based on his life experience, Forth didn't seem like he was lying. So, that was all he could go with for the time being. If his judgment was lacking, then it only meant his life experience was useless. You should do the same your system was doing, try to cause its body to exit yours. Forth said, but, you must seep it into an external object and bind it with yours. This way, the portion of the system's power becomes yours. Forth unsheathed its sword, saying, I did the same and bound the part of the system in my body to this sword. And now, it has become my power. Would any object make the cut? Compass Carburetor inquired. Yes, but it should be an object from your world. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. It then warned him, but, you have to be careful, since this is only possible once. So, if the object you bind yourself with is just a plain piece of fabric, then you won't obtain any useful abilities. It then shot a look at the gun in his hands, though, it seems you have a projectile weapon of sorts with you. I guess that's your best bet. I guess it is. Compass Carburetor looked at the gun in his hand, taking in a deep breath as he recalled his prior experience. Chapter 6. Prepare and wait. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Thinking of the feeling he experienced when the body of the money-making system began to leave his body, Compass Carburetor meditated, hallucinating the same incident as explained by Forth as he soon began to feel some pain in the back. He was still alert, intending to shoot Forth if it tried anything against him. Within a couple of seconds, Compass Carburetor felt like his life force was being siphoned out of him as a thin stream of energy exited his back. It seemed like a tentacle of energy, gold in color, the remainder of the money-making system's body, true form. The moment it peeked out of his back a little, it tried to escape by pulling out the rest of its body. Compass Carburetor grunted, resisting the pain as he pushed the gun in its way, causing the two to touch each other when something seemed to explode in his mind suddenly, causing a torrent of information to flood him. It only took a couple of seconds as he understood everything, realizing that what Forth had said was the truth. No. A shout resounded in his mind that was snuffed out almost instantly. Based on the voice, Compass Carburetor judged that it was the voice of the money-making system when it was in its true form. His muscles convulsed for a couple of seconds as he realized that a faint feeling that he had sensed all along had vanished. All the abilities that he possessed were now his, an integral part of him. All traces of the money-making system in his body had been eradicated. He looked at his hand, noticing that his gun had vanished. When he thought about it, his gun materialized in his hand. It seemed natural that he was capable of doing it instinctively. Upon seeing his actions, Forth sighed in relief, saying with a tone of praise, "Congratulations on becoming a system slayer. Becoming one isn't complex, but a lot of people failed and died in the process." How did they die? Compass Carburetor was confused. It was because all he felt was some pain. The process didn't even require him to manipulate anything or execute some complex maneuvers. All he did was make his gun touch the body of the money-making system that was exiting his back. Even a child could do it. Well, Forth coughed, that's because I perfectly severed your system's body so that only the fragment of it that you can handle would remain within your body. And, this fragment is related to the power that has improved your physique. So, it already shared an integral connection with yourself. Because of this, binding it to the object in your hand had been so simple. As for the others, they weren't so lucky, since they were helped by system slayers less skilled than me. Ah, so it's because of that, and not due to a problem with the process itself. Compass Carburetor nodded in understanding. Upon seeing Forth nod with a hint of pride, he asked, then, how do I return to my world and save my daughter? My system might have very well taken root in her body by now. That would be hard, really hard, Forth said with an awkward smile. But, you said it was possible. Compass Carburetor frowned, expressing anger. Well yeah, I did. It is indeed possible, but, Forth sighed, listen to my explanation first. It pointed at the ground, currently, we are in the system world. And, we aren't systems. We are just mortals with a tiny bit of power. We cannot leave and enter this place as we wish. Even a system needs to accumulate a tremendous reserve of energy before it can arrive here. It then raised its hand, motioning for Compass Carburetor to stop interrupting it as it spoke, and, the only way we can enter a world is when a system opens a portal here. As long as we use our bound object to touch the portal they open, we too would be sucked into the portal and arrive in the world the respective system is entering. It pointed at the gun in his hand. Since you have a projectile weapon, it is relatively easier for you. As long as the projectile you launch hits the portal, you would be sucked into the portal. But, it frowned, even if you return to your world, you cannot extract the system from your daughter's body. You don't have such powers. And, as an ex-wielder of a system, you know how much of a plot armor they are. You cannot kill a system host. And considering the system host is your daughter, killing her wouldn't be possible for you. Then, what am I supposed to do now? Compass Carburetor trembled as tears streamed out of his eyes. As he thought about it, he indeed had no way to save his daughter. Prepare and wait, Forth said, when that system returns here with your daughter, do the same that I did to you. But the problem that exists is that it would sense you the moment you approach it. Moreover, you have no way of knowing when or where it would appear in this world. Then, how did you save me? Compass Carburetor frowned, wiping his tears. He knew that since he was alive, then there was a method. As long as he obtained that method, he would be able to save his daughter. By employing system fragments, Forth said, showing its sword, we call my sword and your projectile weapon as personal fragments. It is proof that we are system slayers. The term system slayer doesn't mean anything. It is just what we survivors have begun to call ourselves. And, it then showed a tiny disc, the size of its thumb, in almost the same manner as what I did to you. I attacked a system host in their world and stole a part of their body. I then used the energy in my body to refine it eventually until I turned the fragment of the system present within that body part into an item. And that's a system fragment. Chapter 7. System Fragment. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Forth flashed the tiny disc in its hands. I refined this by severing the thumb of the assassination system's host. This item allows me to mask my presence even in the system world. That's how I was able to approach you without alerting your system and attacked it. Without something like this, it is impossible to approach a system without it detecting you. But, Forth sighed as it watched the tiny disc crumble into powder. System fragments are something we create by temporarily stealing the power in a system host. So, they could only be used once before they shatter. And, there's a limit to the number of system fragments we can carry with us. How do we find out about this limit? Compass Carburetor inquired. Just as what we did all our lives till now. Forth smiled. Nodding in realization, Compass Carburetor uttered, status. A screen flashed before him immediately. Though, there was a difference this time. There were no longer any accompanying dings that resounded every time the system did something. Moreover, the screen wasn't a user interface like before but was just a simple screen displaying a row of words. Name. Compass Carburetor, race. Human, physique. Health, level 10, strength, level 10, dexterity, level 8, stamina, level 7, intelligence, level 7, cognition, level 9, natural recovery, level 6, 5 senses, level 10, resting, level 10, personal fragment. Anthozoa, arms. 1, so, the gun is my personal fragment. And, since I named it Anthozoa, the information is displayed as is. Compass Carburetor nodded. He was already privy to the information from the previous data surge in his mind. The status screen was just a condensed form of his thoughts in a concise manner. Upon seeing the last row, he inquired, there's something new called arms displayed here at the end. That should be the number of system fragments you can refine for the time being. The name is different for everyone, same for the refinement process. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Fourth nodded, and you'll have to train and improve your abilities so that you'll be able to refine more system fragments in the future. But I'll tell this to you in advance, it said with a hint of helplessness, it's hard to raise it. I've been active for almost 3 decades now, and I'm only able to use 5 system fragments. And even this is considered amazing in our circle. How many of us, system slayers, are out there? Compass Carburetor asked. I'm not sure myself, probably not many. But in our circle, there are 4 others from us. Since I am the one who saved you, I'll address you as 6th from now on. The others too will do the same. It's just a formality in the end. 4th said. I'm fine by that, Compass Carburetor nodded. Then, if we are present when my system arrives here with my daughter, we'll be able to save her. No, 4th shook its head, it depends on you entirely from this point forth. I won't be here, and it's not guaranteed if anyone else will be there to help you. All of us are driven by the same hatred against the systems and feelings of wishing to save our family like you. When I returned to the system world in hopes my family member might have arrived here, I encountered you. And, since your system was weak even among grade 1 systems, I was able to save you. And I have already figured out that it would take some more time before that blasted system would arrive with my family. So, I'll be entering another world to train myself and obtain one more system fragment if possible. 4th sighed and turned around, intending to leave. Wait, how do you return from a world to here? Compass Carburetor asked in a hurry, and, you mentioned a grade 1 system. What does that mean? Upon hearing his question, 4th sighed for a moment as it stopped speaking. Remember how the world paused around you in the end. That's the sign a system is returning to the system world. During that time, the world itself seems like it had paused, but in actuality, the world would remain in a static state for 3 seconds. And, we are immune to that effect. So, if you manage to touch its portal using your personal fragment, you'll arrive with it back here. A 3-second window to return, Compass Carburetor nodded, frowning that it was too short of a time. Given that he came across a system host, he had to tail them until their system plans to return to the system world and would have to aim at its portal in a short window of 3 seconds, that is insanely impossible to achieve. That will depend on you. Recall your life experience and act based on it. That's my only advice. 4th sighed as it began to walk away. No matter the world, time flows the same everywhere. And, there are 4 grades among the systems. And each grade is subdivided into 100 levels. Grade 1 systems are those functioning in mortal limits. Examples are monetary system, dating system, engineer system, etc. Grade 2 systems function in a magical limit. Examples are vampire system, magical system, dungeon system, etc. Grade 3 systems function in the immortal limit. Examples are cultivation system, primordial system, *T system, etc. And finally, reigning at the top are grade 4 systems that are involved with time itself. Examples are time system, reincarnation system, transmigration system, etc. Even killing a grade 1 system is tremendously difficult. As for grade 2 and beyond, it's best to never think about them. There are no system slayers that have survived from being a host to a grade 2 system and beyond. As for a grade 4 system, it's best to never encounter them. Otherwise, they can screw up with your past, present, your flow of time, etc. You won't even know what hit you. 4th shuddered as it talked. Based on what I felt, your system seemed to be below level 10 as a grade 1 system. That was why I dared to save you in the first place. Chapter 8. The Spinning Top. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As to how you can perceive a system's grade and level. 4th shook its head. That's entirely based on experience. Your only point of reference is your system's true form and the sense of danger it emitted. Based on that, try to create an estimate of what level a grade 1 system would be at. It turned around, looking at Compass Carburetor, speaking after a sigh, and, one thing you must note. Even if you enter a world and manage to obtain some of the powers of that world, they would all vanish the moment you appear here. Your current state is what you possess. You can only possess a power of some sort that's available in your homeworld. Then, Earth doesn't have any powers of that sort. So, I won't have any powers even if I were to learn them in another world. Compass Carburetor nodded, asking, then, how were you able to make that powerful attack? That's the power of this sword, Forth showed, and, demons in my world are innately able to wield mana. And, this sword was the pinnacle of my world's treasures. To save you, all I did was unleash this sword's abilities. This is one advantage of being a denizen of a world with innate powers. Humans, demons, elves, and the likes are one of the most common sentient races. So, a lot of the worlds have them. It then turned around, walking away while motioning with its hands, follow me. I'll show you firsthand the method to enter a world. Compass Carburetor nodded, following it as he still maintained a distance of 5 meters between them. He watched his gun appear and disappear from his hands, familiarizing himself with the action. He knew that when it disappeared, it turned into energy that remained within his body. And, this energy was just the part of the money-making system's body that he had turned his. So, it wasn't something whose quantity could be increased in the future. And, Compass Carburetor realized that this energy now formed his core. So, it contained all of his information, from his thoughts to even thought processes. It was basically the core data that formed the individual, Compass Carburetor. There are no powers in my world. While walking through the thicket of trees, Compass Carburetor closed the distance and whispered when he felt a sense of danger from many locations. Is there no way for me to grow stronger? System fragments are the only way I know. Forth replied, there are millions of systems with billions of abilities. Everything depends on which ability of them you obtain while refining a part of their host's body part. Are they able to sense our existence while in a world? Compass Carburetor asked. Of course, Forth nodded, but usually, they would either assume we are hosts to a system or someone that has fallen prey to some system's power. In bigger worlds, numerous systems would be operating there. So, it isn't rare to run into one another. Another thing is that, Forth laughed helplessly, none of us system slayers are worthy enough for a system to care about. So, they won't even glance at us, as long as we ensure to hide ourselves the moment we land in a world, since we usually appear somewhere nearby the system host. This is also the best chance for us to identify a system host. I see, Compass Carburetor nodded as he thought, otherwise, identifying a system host is really difficult. I have to figure out their identities based on my experience and the information I read through many stories. I hope it works. Forth suddenly raised its hand, motioning for Compass Carburetor to stop. It then slowly sheathed its sword. Now that they were close, Compass Carburetor looked at Forth's sword, noticing that it was gold in color, possessing a spectacular engraving. Embedded in the hilt was a gem that lacked any luster. But, he remembered that it was a faint green before, maybe it has different states for different modes of attack. He copied Forth's actions, hiding behind a tree similarly as he peeked out a little, noticing a spinning top hop around from one branch to another. The spinning top was tiny, barely spanning a height of 20 centimeters. It sported an eye at the top as it innocently hopped from one branch to another. The sense of threat it exuded was barely anything as Compass Carburetor followed what Forth had said to him, trying to gauge an estimate based on the sense of danger he felt from the money-making system, definitely a grade 1 system. And possibly a level 1 or 2 at most. He had hidden behind a tree that allowed him to see both the spinning top's movements and Forth's. And now, he noticed the expression of Forth seemed a tad excited as he kept his sword ready, trailing behind the spinning top as he constantly hid behind the trees, using its cover to proceed forward. Compass Carburetor only moved occasionally, increasing his distance from Forth as he could feel something was amiss in the expression of the other party. Just to be safe, he maintained his distance, ready to summon his gun when necessary. He then noticed the spinning top pause upon landing on a certain tree branch as it spun in place for a good 1 hour. All along, Fourth lay in wait patiently. Finally, the spinning top landed on the ground, choosing a place that had some open space without any trees in a range of a meter around it. It then shrieked with a cute tone, looking like it was trying to take a dump while suffering from constipation. After struggling for almost 2 hours in such a fashion, it condensed a portal before it, only big enough for its body to pass through. And, just this action alone seemed to have exhausted it severely as its body seemed tired. Compass Carburetor gazed at the portal from afar, noticing that the other side seemed to be an ocean of sorts. And currently, the point of view was getting closer to the ocean. It probably chose something that had jumped into an ocean or something. He then noticed that Fourth had lifted its sword that turned blurry. The gem on it had turned a shade of gray now. And, the moment the spinning top jumped into a portal, it slashed its sword forth, unleashing a beam that landed on the portal right before it disappeared. Compass Carburetor noticed the beam land on the portal, turning around to look at Fourth to notice that the demon had disappeared. Chapter 9. Encountering a Mysterious System. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It does seem to be working as it said. Compass Carburetor thought as he looked around, able to sense some sense of threat from multiple directions. Picking one that seemed to be the weakest of the lot, he walked in the respective direction, ensuring to always hide behind the trees as he moved. He didn't have the confidence to saunter freely in the system world. If only Earth was a supernatural world, I would have been equipped with some powers to help hide me. He then shook his head, I can only make do with what I have. Frowning, he thought, the money-making system would have entered Stencil's body already. She's only 8 years old now, not at an age where she could achieve much. There is a good chance the system would only lie in wait until she's old enough, probably around 15 years old like me when our mental states are most volatile due to puberty. But, Stencil has been mature and level-headed for her age. She's not trash, not even close to anything I was at her age. So, how will the money-making system go about it? Revenge alone. Upon reaching this line of thought, he scowled, damn it. Even if I were to save her in the end, she would have led a life of suffering until that point. How long would I have to wait until the money-making system returns here? 10 years. 20 years like in my case. 30 years. And even if it does return, I have no way of knowing when that might happen, he muttered, sighing as he massaged his forehead, taking out a kerchief from his pocket as he wiped his face, cleaning it a bit. I need more information. But first things first, I need to obtain a system fragment and strengthen myself. He frowned, thinking, in the end, Fourth was behaving strangely, almost like a madman as he looked at that spinning top. Why was that the case? After thinking for some more time, Compass Carburetor shook his head, intending to worry about them later. At present, he had no experience to gauge the information he perceived. So instead of worrying about everything with no sense of direction, he planned to head into a world and decide accordingly. Soon, he arrived closer to a system that was seated before a rock. It had a humanoid appearance but sported a face that looked like a bucket. And the bucket handle dangled on one side like a broken cord, swinging even though no wind blew through the area. Windbreaker system, you traitorous bastard. You dare snatch my prey from me. The system shouted in rage before stomping on the ground. Compass Carburetor noticed its actions, realizing a point, even if they look humanoid, their actions have an effect on the environment no different to when a human does the same. He thought as such because when the system flailed in the place, a couple of leaves flew because of its actions. And, this was no different if the case had been a human doing the same. So, it meant that while in the system world, the system had to follow certain laws of their own that made them like this. But, Fourth told me to only attack systems while in a world. Is it because if I tried to refine a body part of a system here, something would sense it? Possibly a grade 3 or 4 system. He thought before shaking his head, I'll just tread on the safe route. The raging system then calmed down before it waved its hand, clenching it into a fist as its fist trembled for a good hour before condensing a portal. Based on what Forth told him, a portal showed details from the point of view of the person that the system chose as a target. So, it would show the scene that the target was looking at. And now, the portal was showing the figure of a giant that was standing before a mountain that was dripping lava. And, it seemed to be staring straight at the portal, moving its mouth, seemingly saying something. The giant was conversing with the system's target. Upon seeing the land covered by lava rivers, Compass Carburetor gave up on entering that world. He was currently positioned 50 meters from the portal. Hitting it would be easy. But, he didn't wish to head into a land of giants that lived in and around a field of lava. He would probably die within minutes of setting foot there. Compass Carburetor mentally sighed as he watched the system jump into the portal. The moment it entered, the portal shrunk within a second and disappeared. There's only a second of interval after the system enters the portal. I have to target it within that interval. He assumed based on Forth's actions, maybe if I touched it before that, I would travel through the portal first. So, the system might notice me. He quickly left the place, heading in the direction of another relatively weaker sense of threat. While heading to the location, he came across a trench that was only a couple of meters deep. And, the slope wasn't steep, easily scalable for him. Just when he planned to cross it, he heard some hopping sounds as the sounds seemed to be heading towards him. Upon seeing a black shadow in the thicket of trees on the other side of the trench, Compass Carburetor hurriedly dived behind a tree, noticing the sounds turn louder and louder as his heart thumped louder and louder in response. He hurriedly placed his hand above his mouth to ensure he wouldn't scream in fear as the sounds turned incredibly close. A figure flashed past. It was a deer, but one that was 4 times the size of those found on Earth. As it jumped past, its eyes turned, gazing at the crouched figure of Compass Carburetor that seemed to be shivering in response to its gaze. Upon making eye contact, it didn't do anything, simply ignoring him as it continued to hop past, soon disappearing from the place. Chapter 10. Tricky situation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Eddie ETWW. What the hell was that? Compass Carburetor was barely able to think as even his thoughts were in a fluster. The system that went away looked no different to a deer, even if it was 4 times bigger. But when he looked at it, intense dread filled up his entire being. This was being transmitted from the part of the money-making system that had been turned into his. It was also what had been allowing him to sense the threat of other systems. And, the deer registered in his mind as a mountain, unscalable and unshakable. If he was being targeted by a being of such a scale, then it was easy to just give up on his life. Surviving was impossible. It took him a couple of hours to regain his bearing as he barely stood up, taking in ragged breaths as he shook his head, calming himself down to a controllable extent. Just as he planned to cross the trench, he noticed that he was no longer able to sense a sense of threat from the other side. It seemed the system he was planning to track had already gone on to its next world. Sighing, he closed his eyes, sensing the directions of other sense of dangers, soon picking out the weakest among them as he arrived at a spot behind a boulder, peeking out to see a relatively huge system that was 3 meters in height stand in the place. It was a long vertical column that was covered by chains. And placed at the end of each chain was a collar, constricting the neck of what seemed to be heads. And, judging by their facial features and their long flowing hair, they all seemed to be women from various races, all beautiful. They were lacking their bodies, chained down by their necks. And, what he thought of as a pillar was the core of the system. And, another pair of chains appeared from its front, pierced into the body of a humanoid figure that barely spanned a meter in height, sporting short, stubby limbs and a bulging stomach. It was green in color, sporting a hat that looked like the upper jaw of a person. The figure had large overgrown pair of eyes that darted around in fear from time to time, hurrying as its belly continued to bulge. 20 minutes later, it spat out a murky green fluid that outlined a circle. All the murky green fluid seeped into the circle as it expanded in size, soon turning into a portal that was 3 meters in size, enough for it to enter inside. The tiny figure walked forward, easily dragging the pillar with it as the numerous heads chained to it groaned in pain from time to time. The portal showed the image of a busty woman that was seated on a throne. She had a regal aura around her just based on her seated posture alone as she gave commands. And the receiver seemed to be kneeling on the ground before her. And judging by the way the point of view changed from the woman to touch the ground and repeated numerous times, it seemed the target was kowtowing. There were quite a few figures that stood as guards in the place, all humans. Moreover, standing behind the queen were those that seemed to be puppets of sorts as they didn't seem lifelike. But they moved from time to time based on the queen's orders. Alright, this is a world with humans. At least, that's a plus. And they have puppets with them that can move, probably golems. I'll enter this world and understand the gist of things of being a system slayer first. And this system seems weaker than money-making system, so hopefully, I can target it later. Compass Carburetor summoned his gun and carefully aimed at the portal as carefully as possible so that he wouldn't alert the system of his existence. His heart continued to thump in tension as he took in deep breaths, calming himself as he steadied his aim. Soon, the moment the pillar belonging to the system entered the portal began to shrink, looking like it would disappear within a second. Without any hesitation, Compass Carburetor took a shot. There wasn't even the sound of a gunshot as that was one of the traits of his gun, no gunshot sounds and no knockback. The bullet landed on the portal as he immediately felt his vision blur for a moment before he found himself in a hallway. Right at this time, the loud voice of a woman resounded through the place, "Real, as part of royalty, you have failed to possess any talent and have only managed to scourge through our kingdom's funds. Hereby, I strip you of your status and banish you from the imperial palace." The voice was thunderous, causing the guards posted through the hallway to shudder in fear as the armor they wore even rattled a little. Once the shout died down, a couple of guards escorted a fat man in his 20s by dragging him on the floor and exited the palace. The hallway Compass Carburetor had arrived at was one of the paths that led into the throne room. So, it was heavily guarded. Until now, as all the guards were distracted by the loud noise and seemed to be internally cheering the target of abuse, they failed to notice his figure that had appeared in the place as naturally as air. Once the fat prince had been escorted out, their attention fell on him almost instantly as they directed their swords at him, surrounding him. Halt! Upon seeing the swords pointed at him, Compass Carburetor hurriedly raised his hands, not displaying a hint of resistance while thinking, I don't know their language, but for some reason, the meaning is automatically getting conveyed to me. That's a convenient perk. As he had appeared in the hallway right next to the throne room, he was immediately surrounded by more than 20 guards. One of them immediately entered the throne room and reported about him to the queen.